Alright folks, welcome back to Saddle and Sixgun. Howdy partners. Are you ready for another tale from the American West? We sure hope so. You know, out here on Saddle and Sixgun, we love sharing those stories that capture the grit, the beauty, and the darn-right hardscrabble life of the frontier. And that's exactly what we've got for you today. Before we get started, if you are new to this channel, do me a solid favor and please subscribe. Snow fell heavy and silent across the ridge, swallowing the world in a white that blurred sky from earth. The wind had teeth, biting through even the thickest coat. Yet a small figure pressed forward along the drifted trail. She was no bigger than a fence rail, 6 years old at most. Her thin shoes soaked through and her breath leaving little ghosts in the night air. Now, ain't that a picture? A tiny little girl, out in the middle of a blizzard? What could possibly drive someone so young out into such danger? A ragged doll, missing one eye, dangled from her mittenless hand as she stumbled on. Her lips were cracked, her cheeks raw from the storm, but she did not cry. Children on the frontier learned early that tears froze faster than they warmed. What kept her moving was not courage so much as desperation. See, life on the frontier wasn't for the faint of heart. You had to be tough, resilient, and resourceful. You had to learn to rely on yourself, because help was often a long way off. And that little girl, she was learning those lessons real fast. So what was she running to, or running from? That's the question, ain't it? Where could she be headed alone in this storm? Well, stick around, because it's about to get a whole lot more interesting. Behind her, somewhere beyond the veil of pines, a candle flickered in a lonely cabin where her mama lay groaning, caught between birth and death. The girl's lashes were crusted with snow by the time she saw it. A faint square of yellow burning through the dark set against the hulking shape of a cabin half buried in drifts. She dragged herself to the door, lifted her small fist, and knocked once, twice. Tragedy in the family. A life about to start, but her mama in danger. Now it's all starting to come into focus, ain't it? That little girl wasn't just wandering aimlessly. She had a purpose. She was on a mission. A desperate mission to save her mama's life. Her knuckles made almost no sound against the thick wood. Gathering the last of her breath, she whispered, "Please." Inside, a chair scraped against the floorboards. Boots thudded. The latch lifted with a groan, and the door opened to reveal a man who seemed made of the same timber as the mountains. Well, now, who could that be? A mountain man, living alone in the wilderness? What kind of man would answer the door to a child in the middle of a blizzard? He was broad-shouldered, his beard frosted with snow melt, his eyes shadowed by years that weighed heavier than age. He looked down at her, lantern in hand, the light spilling over the child's shivering frame. "Lord Almighty," he muttered, voice rough as gravel. "What's a young unlike you doing out in this storm?" Her lips trembled, but her words came steady, born of urgency. "My mama went into labor and she's dying in the cabin." The doll dropped from her hand, forgotten as she clutched his coat with desperate fingers. "Please, mister, you got to come," the mountain man. He'd long since stopped answering to any name spoken in town, stood frozen for a breath. His past rose like smoke. What do you think of him so far? Does he look like a man who will help them? Another winter night. Another woman gasping for breath. A child's cry silenced before it began. The memory clawed at him. Yet the sight of this girl's wide, pleading eyes cut deeper than old scars. "Child," he said softly, bending to meet her gaze. "You ought not be out in this storm. The Lord himself said, 'Suffer little children to come unto me. Come get warm a spell by the fire.'" He reached as if to draw her in. But the girl shook her head, fierce despite her shaking limbs. "Mama won't last. You got to come now." The certainty in her voice struck him harder than any preacher's sermon. He felt the storm's hull pressing against the door, urging him to send her away, but something stronger pressed within. And there it is. A glimmer of hope. It sounds like he's got a tormented past that has him in his position today. Do you think it will stop him from helping these two? He set the lantern on the table, grabbed his heavy coat from the peg, and swung it over his shoulders. All right then, he said, fastening the collar high against the wind. We'll go. The girl swayed with relief. He picked up the lantern, its flame steady despite the draft, and held out his free hand. Now, that's a turning point, ain't it? Do you think he is a good man or bad? What would you do if you were him? Please leave a comment. For a moment she hesitated. She had been taught to fear men, taught that most would turn away from her mother's shame, but then her small hand, cold as river stones, slipped into his. They stepped into the storm together. Snow swirled in mad circles, filling the tracks almost as soon as they were made. His stride was long, hers stumbling, but he shortened his pace to match her. That is big. So, is this the first step in new beginnings for him? Or will it only deepen his pain? And the storm is just getting started. Each time she faltered, he steadied her without a word. Their breaths rose in white plumes. Two souls bound by urgency against the vast indifference of winter. Cabin far? He asked over the wind. She pointed with her free hand. Past them trees by the creek. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. He nodded, jaw set. Then we'll make it. The lantern swung between them, throwing brief arcs of gold across the snow. Shadows of pines loomed, their branches heavy with frost, creaking like old bones. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, the sound long and hollow. The man's grip on the girl's hand tightened, a silent vow that she would not be alone. You can feel the urgency in every step. Every breath. A mountain man who has closed himself away and a little girl on a mission. You have to wonder, will they make it? Step by step, they pressed forward. The storm bit harder, but inside his chest, something stirred. A warmth he hadn't felt since before grief had hollowed him. Perhaps it was the child's stubborn faith, or the knowledge that a woman was fighting for life, even now, unseen. Perhaps it was simply the old truth, no one should face death alone. But there's more to it than that. What do you think? At last, through the blur of snow, he saw it. The faint glow of a candle through a cracked shutter. The girl gasped with relief, her steps quickening, though she stumbled twice in her haste. There, she whispered. That's Mama. The man lifted the lantern high, its light spilling over the sagging roofline, and the drift piled against the door. So close. Just a little further. Smoke wavered weakly from the chimney, thin as a dying breath. He looked down at the child, her small face drawn with exhaustion, yet lit with a fragile hope. Stay close, little one, he said, voice low, steady. We're almost there. And as the storm raged around them, their footprints filled swiftly behind, erased as though the night itself sought to swallow them whole. Yet their joined hands burned bright against the dark, a promise that before the dawn, something more than snow would be reborn inside that lonely cabin. The door yielded under his shoulder with a groan, snow tumbling in with them before he forced it shut. The lantern's glow fought against the cabin's shadows, revealing a single narrow room. The cabin, their destination. But what will they find inside? Time is about to run out. Smoke wavered from the hearth, more ash than flame. The fire nearly spent. The air smelled of iron and sweat, raw and urgent, mixed with the faint sweetness of pine logs left unburned. On a cot near the wall lay the woman, her skin shone with fever sheen, hair plastered against her temples, lips moving without sound. A heartbreaking scene, ain't it? One hand clutched a quilt, the other pressed to her belly, taut with labor. Her eyes flickered open at the sound of boots, confusion giving way to the faintest recognition of her child clinging to a stranger's coat. Mama, the girl whispered, kneeling at once, her small hand covering the slick palm of the woman on the quilt. I brung help. The mountain man set the lantern on the table, its light trembling across rough-hewn boards. He stepped closer, his boots heavy with melted snow, his breath low and steady, though his chest felt tight. He had seen women in pain before, seen death hover close. But this lonely struggle in a cabin abandoned by neighbors and kin, stirred a deeper ache. He has seen it before, and you can bet it isn't good. That is why it haunted him. The mother's voice came rough like dry reeds breaking. They said no one would come. Her eyes closed, tears slipping into her hair. Told me I'd reap what I'd sown, bringing shame where I shouldn't. The man knelt, his knees creaking. Reckon they were wrong. You ain't alone now. His voice surprised him, softer than he remembered it being. What do you think of this scene? Please leave a comment. Her breath shuddered, body seized by another wave. She cried out, a sound that clawed through the silence. The girl flinched, clutching tighter to her hand, murmuring a child's prayer in broken rhythm. Please, Jesus, don't take my mama. Please don't. The man glanced at the cold hearth. The room needed fire, light, warmth. Now it's up to him. Do you think he can get the fire started? He must act quickly or her fate is sealed. He moved quick, stacking kindling, striking flint until sparks caught. The flames licked upward, crackling, painting the cabin in orange and gold. With light came clearer sight, the pallor of the woman's face, the way her breath shortened, the slick sweat staining the quilt. She was balanced on the edge of something final. He remembered calves born in snow, his late wife gasping in their own cabin years ago, and his heart clenched. He's been through it before, and it didn't turn out well. He had failed then. He could not fail. Now listen to me, he said, voice low but steady as he returned to her side. You're stronger than you reckon. You just need to hold on. Let me help you through. Her eyes opened again, clouded with both pain and disbelief. You don't know me. Don't need to. His words came without thought. That is a man who has lost. You're somebody's mama, and that's enough. Another contraction tore through her, twisting her body, pulling a groan from her throat. He steadied her shoulders, the heat of her fever burning through his calloused hands. He guided her breathing short and slow, though inside he prayed more than instructed. Can he do it? Can he pull her through? And can he keep it together? The girl wiped her mother's brow with her sleeve, whispering soft encouragements like secrets meant for heaven's ear. Time lost meaning, measured only by the woman's cries and the relentless rhythm of her pain. The storm howled against the walls, but inside the cabin another storm raged fiercer. The man's jaw tightened with every shudder, every cry. They are in a race against time. He whispered to himself, to her, to the unseen, stay with us. Don't let go. Then between one contraction and the next, a cry split the air. A small, fragile wail, thin, uncertain, but alive. The girl gasped, eyes wide with wonder as he caught the child, slippery and red, into his hands. The world seemed to pause, winter itself hushed by the sound. A new life. A baby has been born. He wrapped the newborn in a strip of quilt torn clean, placed the tiny body against the mother's chest. For a heartbeat, light returned to her eyes. She touched the child's cheek, lips parting in a trembling smile. But the relief was brief. Her hand fell limp, her chest barely lifted. The color drained from her face, breath rattling shallow. Oh no! The happy moment is fading too fast. The newborn cried louder as if protesting the fading warmth of its mother. The girl's voice cracked into panic. Mama, Mama, please don't. The man leaned close, pressing his ear near the woman's lips, hearing only the thinnest thread of air. Her skin had the waxen pore of someone slipping away. His own breath faltered. She is slipping away. He had seen this once before, helpless, he had sworn again. Mama, "Wake up," the child pleaded, shaking her arm with tiny hands. The man set the newborn into the girl's lap, wrapping her arms around it. Then he pressed his palm against the woman's sternum, willing strength where there was none. "Don't you quit," he muttered fiercely, voice breaking through his usual quiet. "This is it. All his hopes and fears are about to collide. Not with her watching. Not tonight." The cabin held its breath. The fire crackled low. Shadows stretched along the walls, and outside the storm raged on, but inside all hung on the faint rise and fall of a single chest. The woman's eyelids fluttered once, then stilled. And in that fragile moment, the mountain man realized he might be the only thing standing between life and death. He must act. If he doesn't, 2 children will be without a mother. The cabin seemed to narrow around him, the air pressing close, the silence after the newborn's cry sharp as a blade. The woman's chest barely stirred beneath his hand, breaths shallow and faltering. Her eyelids fluttered once, then stilled, lashes dark against the fevered pore of her skin. He had seen this moment before, the space between one world and the next, and the memory threatened to paralyze him. Can he face his past or will it consume him? But the child's voice broke through, high and ragged. "Don't let Mama go." She clutched her baby brother tighter, rocking him awkwardly as if her small arms could anchor both mother and child to life. Tears streaked down her cheeks, cutting paths through the soot and snow melt. The man set his jaw. A child's cries can melt even the hardest heart. He would not stand by this time. He pressed the heel of his palm against the woman's sternum, steady and firm, counting the beats with a rhythm of his own heart. "Breathe," he urged, his voice low but insistent. "Come back to her. Come back to him. Don't you dare quit now." The fire snapped, sparks rising up the chimney like desperate prayers. "Don't give up. She is so close to breaking through." Sweat beat at his temples, though the cold still seeped through the walls. He pressed again, listening, willing his strength into her frail body. His own chest ached with the memory of another night, another plea unanswered, but he forced the ghosts back. This was not the past. This was now. The girl's voice trembled. "Is she?" "She ain't gone," he said sharply, more to command fate than to comfort. "Not if we don't let her." His eyes caught the flicker of the newborn's fists, tiny but determined, as if the babe already fought to be heard in a world too harsh. The mother's lips parted, barely a whisper escaping. He bent low, straining to catch it. Nothing more than a breath like wind through pine needles, yet it was enough to stir hope. He spoke to her as if his words could tether her soul. "You're stronger than their cruelty. Stronger than the lies they told. That little girl of yours walked through a storm to find me. Don't make her brave steps end here." Her face tightened, a flicker of life beneath the mask of exhaustion. Can she hear him? Can she feel his determination? The man guided her, urging, in, out, steady now. He breathed with her, slow and deliberate, until the faintest rhythm matched his own. The girl crouched closer, whispering prayers she half remembered from a preacher's sermon. "Please, Lord, breathe for her where she can't. Please don't take her." Her voice cracked, but her faith poured out like a stream breaking ice. Don't underestimate the power of faith. The man added his own words he hadn't spoken in years, rough and broken. "If you're listening, do for her what you didn't for mine. Don't leave this child motherless. Don't let me fail again." The room seemed to pause, suspended between despair and deliverance. Then a ragged gasp tore from the woman's chest. Her body jerked, air flooding her lungs like a river breaking through a dam. She did it. The sound startled the child into laughter and sobs all at once. "She's breathing," the girl cried, clutching her baby brother tighter, rocking faster with joy. The man exhaled, shoulders sagging as if a mountain had been lifted. Relief struck him so sharp it almost felt like pain. "It all comes down to whether you gave it your all." He steadied her head with one hand, murmuring, "That's it. Hold on. You ain't through yet, but you're still with us." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused, but alive. She turned her head toward the cries of her newborn, a faint smile trembling across her lips. "My baby," she whispered, voice raw, but certain. He placed the child in her arms, careful, reverent, as though handing over the whole of salvation. They made it. What a moment to behold. The baby's cry quieted against her chest, rooting into the warmth of her skin. She kissed the crown of his head with a trembling mouth. For a moment, time softened. Firelight washed the cabin in gold. Snow pressed silent against the windows, and in the circle of their breath, there was only life. Fragile, unpromised, but real. A picture of peace. The man sat back on his heels, exhaustion creeping through his bones. He looked at the girl, her face shining with tears and triumph. She met his gaze with a trust that cut straight through the walls he had built. In her eyes, he saw not a stranger, but a savior. He shook his head slightly, muttering, "I'm no savior, child, just a man trying not to fail twice. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's wrong. What do you think?" But inside, something thawed. He had shut himself away from people, from their needs and their sorrows, thinking it safer. Yet in this cramped cabin, with a child's hand clutching hope, and a mother's breath fragile, but returning, he felt the stirrings of a truth he'd long buried. Maybe he was meant to carry more than his own grief. The woman shifted weakly, her voice barely more than a thread. "Why? Why did you come?" He glanced at her, words rough but steady. "Because someone should have, and I reckon it had to be me." Her gaze lingered on him, puzzled, but softened by gratitude. Her lips moved again, but the effort exhausted her, and she drifted into a faint sleep, baby nestled safely against her. Was it fate? Or was it just a man doing what was right? The girl leaned against his side, eyes heavy, but unwilling to close. "You won't leave, will you?" The question struck deep, not because of its innocence, but because of its weight. He looked at the fire, then at the woman breathing beside it, and finally at the child clutching her brother. "I ain't going anywhere tonight," he said softly. And though the storm raged on outside, inside the cabin a fragile seed had been planted, of trust, of belonging, that neither of them yet dared name. Dawn spilled across the snow like pale gold poured from heaven's hand. The storm spent, the world hushed in a fragile stillness. The mountain man stepped outside, lantern no longer needed, and drew in the sharp morning air. The trees stood heavy with frost, each branch glittering as though touched by fire, and for the first time in years he felt something close to peace. Will this feeling last, or will his past return to haunt him? He turned back to the cabin, smoke curling from its chimney now that the fire had been coaxed to strength, and the faintest sound of laughter drifted through the cracks, thin, weary, but alive. Inside the mother stirred weakly on her cot, the newborn pressed against her chest. Her face remained pale, lips dry, yet her breathing had steadied through the night. She was not well, but she was present, anchored to the earth by more than pain. At her side, her daughter sat close, humming a tuneless lullaby, the doll cradled under one arm, while the other shielded her tiny brother as though she alone could guard him. The man crouched beside them, setting a bowl of porridge on the table. He had prepared it awkwardly, hands unused to the gentle work of stirring oats instead of splitting logs, but the smell of it filled the room with humble warmth. "Is he staying?" "You ought to eat," he said gruffly, sliding it closer. "Strength don't come from air." The mother lifted her eyes to him, shadowed yet clear. "Why would you help me?" Her voice wavered, not from lack of gratitude, but from disbelief. "No one else would. They've all turned their backs." How has life impacted her? He studied her face, the fine lines carved by hardship, the softness that still lingered beneath. "Because someone should have," he paused, his gaze dropping to the infant swaddled in quilt. "And I reckon I was meant to." She looked at him a long moment, as if testing the truth of his words, then lowered her eyes to the child at her breast. The baby stirred, mooing softly, and her lips curved into something near a smile. Yet shadows lingered in the corners of her mind. She remembered the faces of townsfolk, the whispers behind palms, the cruel judgment cast like stones. A woman ruined, not fit for respect, better left alone. The memory stung sharper than the labor pains that still throbbed in her body. Do you think he is the one to help her move forward? They'll say I'm not worthy, she murmured more to herself than him. The man's jaw tightened, the flicker of anger in his eyes betraying his quiet nature. Folks talk because it's easier than doing right. Don't mean a word of it is true. He reached for the wooden bowl, broke off a piece of bread, and offered it to her hand. Eat. Let their talk starve, not you. He doesn't want her to think about their hate. Her fingers brushed his as she took it, fragile against his calloused skin. Something unspoken passed between them. Not promise, not yet, but recognition. The meeting of two lives weathered by loss, now drawn close by need. The girl watched them with wide eyes, sensing the shift, though she could not name it. The girl notices a changing. Mama, she whispered, resting her head against her mother's arm. He stayed all night. He didn't leave. The woman's gaze flicked toward him again, softened by that simple truth. No, she said faintly, almost to herself. He didn't. The hours passed with the rhythm of small tasks. He repaired the fire, patched a gap in the wall with boards scavenged from a broken stool, fetched water from the creek. Each motion was quiet, deliberate, as though he were mending not just wood and flame, but something far less visible. The cabin, once brittle with despair, began to feel less like a place of dying and more like a place where life might linger. As dusk drew near, the girl dozed against the cot, her brother curled in her lap. The mother's strength wavered, but her eyes followed the man as he moved about the room. Is it a place to call home? At last, she spoke, voice fragile, but steady. You carry yourself like a man who's lost something. He stilled, his back to her, hand resting on the edge of the table. The words reached into a place he had locked away. He did not turn, but answered, lost something? A man who's lost knows what it is to be left. That's why I couldn't leave you. Now you know why he is in his current position. The silence that followed was not heavy, but reverent. She let her eyes close, whispering, then maybe God sent you here after all. The words lingered in the fire-lit air long after her breathing slowed into sleep. The man sat back, his gaze falling on the girl, curled protectively around her brother, on the mother, who had nearly slipped beyond reach, and something tightened in his chest. Was it heaven sent? He had not asked for this bond, this fragile belonging, but already it was binding him in ways he could not deny. Outside the wind rose again, rattling the shutters like fingers at the glass. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the town stirred with gossip and judgment, their voices ready to condemn what they did not understand. But in the quiet cabin, another truth whispered louder. That family is not always chosen by blood or sanctioned by society, but by the simple decision to stay. And as the fire dimmed, casting the room in amber glow, he felt the weight of that choice pressing close, a burden he could not lay down. Winter loosened its grip slowly, as though reluctant to surrender. Weeks passed, each day marked by the steady rhythm of survival. Do you think he is here to stay? Firewood split, porridge stirred, water fetched from the creek. The cabin, once brittle with despair, began to change. Smoke rose from its chimney with regularity, the scent of bread mingling with pine. Laughter echoed where once there had been only silence. The mother grew stronger, though her steps were slow, and her body still carried the memory of pain. She spent hours cradling the newborn, his soft whimpers filling the air with a fragile music. Her daughter hovered close, never straying far, her small hands eager to help, and always there was the man moving quietly around them, his presence like a steady flame, never demanding, never loud, yet filling every shadowed space. Are they a family now? He repaired the roof with pine shingles cut by his own hand, patched the door so the wind no longer crept in at night, and carved small toys from leftover wood, a horse, a bird, a cradle for the girl's doll. At first, she watched him with cautious eyes, uncertain whether such kindness could be trusted. He wants to make it into their home. But one evening, when he placed a small carved horse in her palm, she hugged it tight and whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time she had spoken to him without fear. The mother saw it all, her heart stirring with something she had thought long dead. She remembered the cold stares of townsfolk, the whispers that marked her as unworthy. The trust is growing. But here in this cabin, there was no judgment, only the quiet language of care. One night, when the fire burned low, she looked at him across the table, candlelight flickering in his beard, and asked softly, "Why stay?" He lifted his eyes, holding hers for a long moment, "Because leaving would have been easier, and I've done easy before. Didn't end well." His voice was rough, but his meaning clear. She turned her gaze to her children, her throat tight with unspoken thanks. The days folded into one another. Snow melted in patches, revealing stubborn grass, and the creek sang louder as the thaw pressed through. Yet whispers traveled even here. The old days are fading. A passing trader mentioned the town's talk, how folk said the widow had snared a man out of pity, how they questioned the kind of home being built in secret among the pines. The mother lowered her eyes at the words, shame pressing heavy, but the man only shrugged, splitting a log with one clean strike. "Let him talk," he said. "Ain't their roof keeping you warm?" It was in that moment she realized how far he had come into their lives, not with promises, but with presence. Still, doubt nodded at her, whether she deserved such steadiness, whether he would one day walk away like so many before. That night, after the children slept, he sat by the fire carving something larger, his knife steady in the dim light. Will the outsiders take it from her? The sound of wood shavings falling to the floor was the only noise besides the crackle of flame. She watched him, curiosity and weariness mingling, until at last he set the piece before her. It was a cradle, simple but strong, polished smooth where his callous hands had worked. The arcs were cut with care. The joints fitted tight, every line speaking of patience. He placed it by the fire where shadows danced across its curved sides. "Ain't much," he said quietly. "But maybe it's a start." Her hand flew to her mouth, tears rising before she could stop them. "With this gift, there will be no separation. No one's ever." The words faltered. She looked at him, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Why?" His answer was a silence first, then a breath. "Because I know what it is to be left with nothing. And I know what it is to wish someone had stayed." Her tears fell freely then, not of grief, but of release. She is starting a new journey. She bent her head over the cradle, the fire's glow washing her face in gold. And for the first time in years, she felt the weight of belonging. The baby stirred, his cry small and insistent, and she lifted him gently, laying him in the cradle. His fists waved in the air, then settled, his breathing softening into sleep. It is a place of peace and love. She gazed down at him, then up at the man whose presence had woven itself into their lives like thread through cloth. The girl, half woken by the sound, rubbed her eyes and whispered, "Mama, is he ours now?" Her innocence cut through the silence like a bell. The woman looked at the man, heart pounding, searching his face for denial. What is his answer? But he only met her gaze, steady and sure, and though no words were spoken, she knew the answer. Snow drifted soft against the window. The storm long passed, yet its memory lingered. They had been forged in that night of fear and death, death close enough to taste. And now something new stood in its place. Not perfect, not safe from gossip or hardship, but real. They are a family. The fire crackled, the cradle rocked, and she felt the shift inside her. An ending and a beginning all at once. And as the night deepened, she realized with a quiet awe that a home had been made, not from timber or stone, but from the decision to stay. Well now, ain't that a story? So, what do you folks think? Have you ever felt lost, only to find your way again in the most unexpected place? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What city are you watching our video from? We want to thank you for spending a bit of your time with us here on Saddle Sixgun. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories from the Old West. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and share it with your friends who love a good Western tale. Until next time, happy trails and God bless.